Yeah. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, or good morning or good evening, wherever you're joining us from. And if you're joining from the States, happy Tuesday after a long holiday weekend and happy fall official fall season. I hope you've gotten your pumpkin spice and everything nice to celebrate the start of fall. I hope everyone had a great summer. As we're giving everyone just a couple of seconds to get in and get joined, I like to get everyone kind of chatting in the chat box. So if you want to open up that chat box and let us know where you're joining from, Bonnet is going to tell us a bit of a fairy tale today. So a little bit of a preview. So if you want to let us know where you're coming from and maybe your favorite childhood fairy tale, that'll kind of get everyone familiar and chatting in the chat box while we wait for everyone to get settled this afternoon. Lana, I don't know about you, but I think my favorite is probably, and I don't know if this is really a fairy tale or just more beauty, more Disney, but Beauty and the Beast was always my favorite. I
Nice.
loved Belle and
Yeah,
all of her books.
I think I don't know how cool it is for a guy to say that, but Cinderella.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah.
good
Um,
story.
yep. So, but I think, it's all indeed like Disney.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
We
mean, D Disney kind of cornered the market on the fairy tales these days.
yeah, I recently bought the book from the what is it? Brothers Grimm
Yeah.
and the lady selling it to me was like, "Are you sure you wanna get that book?
They-
Because it's really different."
I was like, they're actually pretty dark, right?
Yeah. So,
They were actually pretty dark. I always loved Hansel and Gretel, because you love the idea of the gingerbread house and all of that, but then the witch got pretty scary. Yes.
yep, yep.
All right. Well, it looks like we've got everyone chatting. Thank you guys all for playing along with us, letting us know where you're coming from and what your favorite fairy tale was. It looks like we've got a pretty good number of people and couples still coming in. So I will go ahead and get us started so that we don't take too much of our time. So Vanna has lots of time to dig into what he's going to tell us about today. So welcome everyone to Back to Basics, Managing Retention During Mergers, Splits, and Shifts. If you want to jump to the next slide real quick. I'm Jennifer Millett, Vice President of Event Strategy and Partnerships here at ARMA. And if you are an ARMA member, thank you so much for taking the opportunity to take advantage of your membership and being part of our community. We truly can't do it without you and your contributions to our community. So thank you so much. If you are not an ARMA member, we highly encourage you to take a second to go to arma.org and see all the things that we have to offer, everything from education opportunities, certificates, the IGP, near and dear to my heart, events, webinars that we offer every week. So lots of ways to get involved, ways to help advance your career. We currently just released a white paper that Vanna was actually a part of that started at the Info Next conference, really how to incorporate IG into your corporate culture, something that ARMA is really passionate about, and we think it's going to help our community immensely in getting IG concepts adapted across organizations, public and private. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that white paper, definitely go check out arma.org, where I think Megan will pop it into the chat to the direct link on how to download it. If you're a part of InfoNext, you got a copy of it. If you're coming to InfoCon, you'll get a free copy. So another enhancement to visit us at InfoCon. And if you're a member, there is definitely a pricing discount on getting that white paper. So something new that we just released and we are really excited about. So all kinds of good things at ARMA. All right, Anna Fionis. Good. And then I just want to take a quick second to thank our sponsors like Filers Keepers. Without their support, we can't bring content and programming to our community, so that we hope when you are considering programming our services and products for your organization, you consider the companies that support you. And I think that might, oh, a couple of frequently asked questions. Yes, you will get a copy of the slides. You will get access to the recording. Just keep an eye on your inbox. Those usually come about 24 to 48 hours after today's event. And those will come to you directly to the email address that you registered for today's event with. And a couple housekeeping items. We, like I mentioned, we had you guys put where you're coming from and your favorite fairy tale in the chat. We like that to stay lively. Use that chat box to put your comments in, your experiences, kind of things that you want to chat about, but put your questions for Ivana in the Q&A box. That way we can make sure that those get to him. The chat box can get moving pretty quickly, and we don't want to lose that question. So if you've got a question, make sure that goes into the Q&A box. We also love the reactions. So if you hear something you like or you agree with, or maybe you haven't heard before, you can use any of those emojis to let Vana know how you're feeling. So we love that reaction bar as well.
Yep.
And
Maybe one more thing on the allowing people to ask questions.
oh yes, yep,
Yeah.
yep. That good point. So we have recently been allowing our audience to come on at the very end, if time allows, to ask questions live. So at the end, when we bring up the Q&A screen and we're doing this kind of live Q&A options, if you would like to go off mute, just raise your hand, and we will on our end, unmute you, and then you'll have to do the same on your end, unmute, and then you can ask Vana a question live. And not just type it in. It's kind of a fun, more interactive way to ask those questions. So I'll make that announcement and a reminder at the end, but you just have to raise your hand and we will make that possible for you.
Yeah, and really feel free to just raise your hand whenever, because, otherwise I'll just be talking to myself for an hour. So, I like company.
And then, like I mentioned earlier, webinars, we are offering all kinds of great content to keep our audience, up to date on all the things you know, that are new to the industry. And to go along with the white paper that I mentioned earlier, there is a webinar that will speak directly to that white paper, how we wrote it, what we're hoping to come out of it. So if you're ever, interested in what our additional webinars we have available, there's a calendar on the ARMA website where you can register for all of them in one spot. You can scan this QR code to see everything that we have coming available. And then we typically always provide a list in the webinars that we're offering. So take a look at all the good webinars we have coming up and sign up for the ones that you think will help you out.
Brilliant. And then I think, I'm not sure, maybe this is me.
That
Um,
is you. I will turn
all
it
right.
over. This show is yours.
Thank
We will be behind the scenes. So if anyone needs any help, don't be afraid to chat us in the chat box. But Vana, take it away.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Wanne Pemmelaar. I'm the CEO and co-founder for filerskeepers, and also what in my family is called the baby company, Lostronaut. It's a legal tech company, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. And I clearly catfished you a little bit here with this photo. I think for my next webinar, I'm going to promise you a more recent photo, I guess, of myself. Yeah, so maybe some fun facts about Filers Keepers. We are a family-owned, bootstrapped company, no outside investors. At this moment, we have 75 team members. What we do is we read all the laws in the world and take from their rules to tell companies how long they should store their records and data, and then we help apply those rules to the records and data of our clients. We have over 3,000 multinational customers, and we have 346,000 citations, so legal rules that tell you how long you need to store your records and still counting. And a lot of partners. So we work with a lot of law firms and other folks in the industry that we supply with data. Um, we have an online platform where you can build a retention schedule. You can say, hey, I'm in these countries or states. I am in these industries, and then we build you a retention schedule, a draft retention schedule automatically. You can then update that, make it completely bespoke, calculate what's the most optimal retention period, given all the countries and states you're in. Check where your residual risk lies, where do you need to keep it at minimum a bit longer or at maximum a bit shorter. And we can keep it up to date. So when the law changes, we can send you a ping and say, hey, the law has changed. It went from 3 to 4 years. Do you accept or decline? And now that a lot of our clients have an up-to-date retention schedule. They go, now what? And then we say, now, well, now you implement it into your systems and processes. And that has led for us to a couple of connectors with Microsoft and OneTrust and ServiceNow and some others. We're actually hiring now new developers to actually speed up the connectors. So if you know anyone, let me know. Then and following the now what question, we're getting into some really cool conversations about major shifts, major transitions, basically in the life of a corporate or any organization. And I thought it might be a good idea to just get in there a little bit deeper and look at, how to deal with records retention, but also records management in the larger sense, when it is about mergers and divestments and relocations and all of that. Because we're seeing a lot of examples on how to do it and how not to do it, especially how not to do it. And we thought maybe just to share a few lessons learned. Everybody's talking about AI. I just, make it a habit to really briefly touch upon it. I believe there is no AI without proper records management or information governance. Guys, I'm not going to get into that discussion today with you. But we need proper information management, right? We need high quality, up-to-date data. We need compliance. We need ethical data use, accountability, efficiency in data handling. And if we don't manage the data and the records properly, then what we're getting is flawed decisions, regulatory violations, inefficiencies. So we don't want that. We need to eliminate the rot. We need to organize the data properly. And that's also maybe a fun bridge to what my other company, Lostronaut, is doing. We're actually supplying legal tech and legal operations teams with the laws and regs so they can train their AI. Yeah, so that's the new company. So we're venturing into broader legal tech. I'm not going to talk more about that today, but um, yeah, there you have it. Um, it's always fun to talk about AI, but it's really, everything changed when the GDPR arrived already. We're almost nearing a decade now ago, and I just want to every single presentation I give, I always have these two slides in here. The regulators, the legislatures, they want real compliance. Yeah, so we're beyond you know, the situation where we can say, oh, privacy is just a tabletop exercise, desktop exercise, and we just shove a bit of policies around, and no, we really need real compliance. And so my background is that of a privacy lawyer. I'm a recovering lawyer. And then I grew into records management. So I actually have litigated in Europe from the Netherlands the topic of data retention. I've seen the red spots in the necks of the regulators when debating this. I know what it takes to convince a regulator of what necessity is, keep data no longer than necessary. What does that mean? So I'll be, where I can, I'll try to bring you the privacy perspective as well into this whole conversation. But yeah, they want real compliance. So what corporate transitions do I want to talk about today? I want to talk about relocations, very important, mergers, divestments, dissolution, and bankruptcy. And what I really liked is that, what are important corporate transitions, what important corporate transitions are for our corporates are also, by analogy, important moments in our own lives as humans. Um, so, relocation, you can think of it as moving your house, right? It's a big event for a lot of us. unless you have done it 15 times already and you kind of are pretty portable. But yeah, you need to pack, sort, discard, transport what matters, organize everything. So that's a big and stressful event, and add to that building a house or something, it makes it even more complex. A merger, can be the equivalent of a marriage. You need to combine households, traditions, responsibilities, or just, we can say marriage, but you can also say just a relationship. Divestment could probably be a bit more equivalent of a divorce. You're dividing the assets, you're separating what was once shared. And I would say that maybe a dissolution is, yeah, a death in the family, orderly closure, legacy preserved, and then bankruptcy. I think you can kind of either equivalent is the equivalent of a not so peaceful death, or maybe an emergency or so, where you no longer are in control. So yeah, what's important in the lives of any one of us is also important in the life of a corporate. Um, and I'm gonna tell you how to kind of deal with the retention, how to deal with records management, and for everything, I feel that I'm just gonna tell you a bit of a fairy tale today, because I'm gonna tell you a story that I believe is not true, and that I think is my ideal scenario of how these processes will go. And that's why I want to tell you about, there once was a happy records manager who worked for an organization that had an up-to-date retention schedule. Let's start there. Had information, governance, and records management policies that people actually adhere to. That would be nice, right? And the organization would always ask the records manager for their opinion. All the boxes were properly labeled, or the data was classified, and it was very clear who was the owner and who was the steward of that data. Yeah, so I guess that, I'm aware that that's not the case for most of you. And if you're there, then good for you, and we should all like stop. I should stop talking and probably listen to you. So that's where, I'm gonna be very realistic to whatever I'm gonna tell you. Yeah, it's just in an ideal world, this is how we should run this. Yeah. Now, why is this important? Um, every company or organization, I'm going to talk about company a lot if you don't mind, but if you are nonprofit or governmental, then please don't take offense. Some of this also applies to you, of course. But every company will face major transitions. Yeah, moving, splitting, merging, closing, everything. And records are not just boxes and files, and that's what a lot of people just still think. No, it's evidence of compliance. It supports audits, protects rights, but it's also a great value, source of value. Yeah, if we talk about data. So and there are some pretty long tail risks. I don't need to convince you of those. Yeah, litigations, fines, whatever. And everything comes together in those transitions. And those are usually also the moments that things can get pretty bad, or if you do them well, they can get pretty good, because it can build the momentum for you to get your act together. So in this fairy tale, I believe that chapter 0 is the governance framework. So I'm going to talk about a few topics which are universal to the type of transition. So I believe that, this is something you need to have in order before you can undergo through, or something you need to do through with any transition. Um, and the first one is, of course, you need to have proper governance. And we're having a lot of conversations around governance. I believe that in the US, it's still too legal, and I believe that in the EU and some other parts in the world, it's still too privacy, and we kind of need to reconcile more. and really think so very deeply about what works. And I'm also very realistic and to say that not every there's not one model that works for every company or organization. But you need a sponsor. You need to know who's accountable, responsible consultant. You need the whole Rocky basically. Um, and what the problem is, what the risk is with all of this is nobody knows who is responsible once the business unit needs to move or merge or whatever. There is no clear Rocky. Maybe you have invested greatly in it in the past and now everybody forgot, or it just doesn't suit them very well at this moment, right? When we're moving stuff. Um, and executive sponsorship is hard because they just closed the deal and they're super happy and they're busy looking at their bank account. But now we need to properly manage everything. And yeah, so and then maybe no standardized playbook, no poor documentation, technology governance gaps, all of that I believe are risks. So now is the time, if you're not in a merger, if you're not in a major transition, to look at your governance, yeah, so that you're ready for when it becomes yeah important, because those major transitions are the moment that you get tested. Um, I believe very much in a risk register. Um, there's a great like cover your ass kind of idea to it. Yeah. So anything that is at risk of going wrong, or you just feel like you haven't been able to mitigate the risk, you've identified it but not, then I believe it's just important to note that and to document that and to have legal or senior leadership sign off on it. Otherwise, worries, just remain vague worries. Yeah. And it can at one point materialize. And it's a wonderful way to check off, anything residual in a structured, trackable, accountable process. Yeah, someone is asking, do you have an example of a risk register? I literally believe it's an Excel spreadsheet where you just name, the risk and the severity of the risk, or at least perceived severity of the risk, what the consequences are if it materializes, and what you've tried to do to mitigate it, and then have leadership look at it. Yeah, so it should be fairly simple, straightforward. Add some other metadata like a date and persons involved, contact persons. But I think it should be pretty straightforward because you need to be able to fill those things in also on the fly while you're actually walking around in your office. Um, but hey, happy to work with you on something. We have a few risk registers in our services, especially when we map retention schedules to structured systems, where you can't have a perfect mapping sometimes, yeah, just because of the limitations of the system, and then we note that in a risk register. So, um, I believe it's also very important to have a records, yeah, transition playbook, so to say, where you kind of go play by play through what the motions are. Yeah. So you need to know what exists. You're not gonna be able to move anything or split anything if you don't know what exists. Yeah. You need to be able to apply retention, legal hold screening. You need to even just, people are going to fight over things, so you need to be able to resolve those fights. You need to know where to go. Don't There should be no breaches. This is like those moments are more and more also prone to data breaches, compliance breaches. So that's something you want to kind of beat ahead of the actual materialization. And it's wonderful to have these playbooks because you can get all the other stakeholders involved and let them do their thing. Yeah, physical security, cybersecurity teams, privacy teams. They all have an opinion. Um, and it's very simple, similar to the risk register. Document everything. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. It's very simple. Um, and I'm also a great proponent of monitoring KPIs and everything. So let's talk a little bit about that. Um, then I believe there is a whole transition timeline model, and this is where the real fairy tale comes. Yeah, if I had it my way, then you have time minus 180 to 120. You are in making an inventory of all your records and data. Yeah, so you got 60 days for that, 2 months. That's not a lot, by the way. And you need to know about everything that you have, locations, records data, physical, digital, doesn't matter. But I also appreciate you can't get that done in 2 months. So again, now is the time. Don't wait for when you have to manage these transitions. And I have been in the situation where Philips was spinning off their light division, so it became Signify, that's called now, all the Philips lamps, Huey, and all of those. And they had to split a company that's 100 years old into two parts, with literally like all split down the middle. And I still can see the faces of the IT folks and the records folks and the privacy folks having to deal with this situation. And that was a horrible 2 years for them. I know. And I also know that a lot did not survive that transition. Career-wise, of course. Um, so you need to now is the time. You need to start applying screening and purge roles for another few months. Um, and then you need to kind of prepare your extractions, labels, redactions, secure the logistics, and then you're gonna transfer everything in phase 4, and then you're gonna reconcile the inventories, and you're gonna check everything, check your KPIs and everything. Now, let's go to the another part of that fairy tale story. I would love to see an inventory completeness of 100%. Hey, someone can dream, right? So yeah, that would be nice. I think, nobody is starting from 100%, so that's always troublesome, of course. And I mean inventory, I really literally mean any kind of inventory. Yeah, so it's your traditional records inventory, but it's also your systems inventory, your data inventory, your ROPAs, all of that. And I also believe that this is the moment to really get your retention compliance in order. Yeah, so things should be destroyed. Whatever you shouldn't take or you shouldn't give away, get rid of it. And that I know that 100% is very difficult to achieve, because you're dealing with all kinds of constraints and restrictions and impracticalities there. But that's my ideal world. But put in a chat what you think. What is an acceptable KPI. Maybe it's way lower, but it's hard to kind of sell that, right, to your leadership. Like, oh no, I think it should be 70%. What? What's going to happen with the other 30%? Yeah. So don't destroy anything in legal holds, that is under legal hold. But maybe on the metadata integrity, we can be a bit more flexible. Yeah, 95%. And maybe we can have a bit of downtime, yeah, accessing critical records. But it shouldn't be too much. Um, so yeah, that's I think super important to at least have KPIs and acceptance criteria. Yeah, let's keep it at that. Um, let's talk about relocations as the first, topic. What do you want to do? You want to maintain as much access to the records, at least the important ones, during and after the move. Yeah. And you want to purge rot, right? That's what you do. When you move something, you're gonna put it in boxes, and you're gonna look at it, and you're gonna like, oh, this is really not something we need to move. Because the more you put in boxes, the more expensive the move is gonna be. Yeah, we're talking here, of course, records at scale. Um, and you need to preserve the chain of custody. And the stupid thing is that that move moment is a do or die deadline. There's no negotiation usually, right? It's you either do it or not. And then the question is, are you truly ready for it, right? Are you able to are you are you gonna make mistakes? Are you gonna ignore legal holds, move roads, have an incomplete inventory, lose stuff? Have a weak chain of custody where maybe later someone can claim in litigation that the chain of custody was broken and therefore we cannot trust the record. Yeah, a lot of times also digital systems are overlooked, especially on premise, legacy stuff. So don't forget that. So yeah, I think those are kind of like the risks, and we've seen materialization. Recently, we saw like a law firm moved 2,000 archival boxes without prior retention screening. So they just transported, expired and sensitive data, and then they, spend way too much on storage bills. And because the labeling wasn't done really well, they start to misplace old client files. And it just got worse by relocating everything. Yeah. So, we need to be in control here. Um, and one thing that I also wanna I think I've kind of mentioned this already here, these risks, but one thing the lowest bullet here is I started to think about what happens if you move from one state to the other or one country to the other, but you're not moving the physical location where you store your boxes for offsite storage, right? You just keep that at the same location because why would you need to? You're just moving offices. You don't need to move offsite book storage locations. Well, what if the offsite book storage vendor charges you, through zones, right? And now you fall in a completely different zone, and the cost of retrieving a box just has considerably increased. Did you think of that? Do you need to also move locations? At least you need to think about it. I'm not sure if that would, if the economical rationale is there to move those as well. But yeah, it's not just anything that you keep on site. Um, then, um, yeah, this is where, again, fairy tale, you need to conduct a detailed inventory of everything you have in every file room. And the emphasis is every, there is not, and this is where I see it go wrong very often. Everybody starts with the proper intent and they do the preparatory work. And then at one point, they just run out of time. And then it becomes like, just put it all in boxes. Let's just, the moment you don't have your inventory, you're gonna lose things. And I have clients that tell me, wanna, if only we would have, put proper labels on these boxes. Now we have 300 mystery boxes, or even worse, 10,000. We don't know what's in there. So if you then ship it off to offsite book storage, you're paying for something that you don't even know if you should be paying for it. Um, So you need to apply retention rules, honor legal hold, standardized metadata. And of course, you need to do packing and labeling, and you can tell me better how that works. I'm just a simple lawyer, but think about it. If you haven't properly boxed and labeled everything, what a worker can do. What is it? 10, 15 boxes per hour if they work hard, and if it's easy. The moment it becomes poorly organized, which I think is a more realistic thing, then it drops to easily 5 to 6 boxes per hour per worker that they can pack and label. So then if you have 1,000 boxes, it's gonna take a 4-person team 7 to 8 working days. Um, you have to kind of do the math on all of those actions. Um, I think I can go through the transport. I think just need to keep track of everything, basically. Pretty, and then you need to check everything, do the reconciliation, and make sure that you have adhered to all the KPIs and maybe register any incidents in your risk register. Yeah. That you have come to notice, things that have gotten damaged or lost or whatever it is. Super important. And then you need to go after the moving company or whatever, whoever you think you should go after. So that's what I had to say about relocation. Then let's go to chapter 2, mergers, which I think poses a whole new set of things. I mean, there can be in mergers also relocations. The same goes for divestments, probably more so in divestments. But I'm not gonna rehash that whole thing that I just said. But with mergers, um, it's more like a marriage. So what you want to do is you want to harmonize retention schedules and records management practices, and you want to ensure business continuity, and you just want to prevent a rot explosion where all your troubles have just doubled. Yeah. And there's always the situation that one of the two or how many parties were involved has been doing records management or information governance a little bit better than the other. So you have to kind of reconcile those cultures. I always believe that you should try and kind of let the most advanced team lead, and then use what's good in the practice and keep an open mind. What I just find so hilarious is we saw that with a bank, two banks merged, and one had a 7 year tax retention, the other one 10. What are we gonna do? Like whole discussion. So those are fun challenges. And I think the answer is pretty simple. If you look at a retention schedule, it's based on the jurisdictions of the group. So the fact that, the two retention schedules can have a different retention period can be logical, yeah, if the geographic scope is different of the two companies. They now come together, you need to form a new retention schedule, you need to look at the new geographic scope and reconcile all of that. And sometimes there's just a bit different risk appetite and a different decision. So then you need to kind of reconcile those. But it could be that, what you cannot no longer have after a merger is that the one part does 7 years, the other part does 10 years, unless it's super decentralized setup. Yeah. But I believe that this will follow the way that the business gets integrated. Yeah. So are you integrating systems? Are you integrating processes? Is it all, are you going to lead them centrally? You need to have one standard. Yeah. If you run the businesses separate, then you can maybe have a bit more diversification in terms of retention periods. Um, so the risks, of course, are over under retention, but also the retention schedule might not be the biggest problem, might be the metadata and the vastly different way of looking at records and data between two companies. So that's usually the real headache, I think, where you need a lot of coffee, like you see this little man, and time to kind of get that all together. But, that's what we have AI for now. So let's hope that AI can help us reconcile those differences. Um, and please use a merger to do a good cleanup of your rot. Um, Build one inventory, yeah. Use what's good from the one inventory and map it. And if it becomes too difficult, um, or you think you're on the wrong track, do both. Map A into B and map B into A. Compare, yeah, and see what sticks and what's better and where the lessons learned can be, yeah. It's really weird, but sometimes, mapping the reverse suddenly gives you the epiphany that you needed. Um, um, I guess the biggest issue with retention harmonization is not per se the retention period that I just talked about, but the functional scope in the retention schedule. So, we described something as A, but they, the other side, have described it as AB. In other words, their bucket is bigger and our bucket is smaller. How we're gonna do that, and that can also lead to different retention periods. So you just have to have those discussions and see if you can reconcile those. Um, you know, be compliance driven, I would say. Yeah. So try to go for the stricter, or if it's all minimums, the longer retention requirement. If it's all privacy driven, then have a think of if you need to go longer just because you want to. Um, and the thing is with this, I do believe there is time. Yeah. So I believe you need to follow the actual integration. We're moving to one big Workday instance. Okay, good. Let's do HR for Workday for the new situation. And then migrations are wonderful system migrations because you can kind of take what is in accordance with the retention schedule and then you can sunset the rest. Legal holds, of course, you need to reconcile all of those, and you need to make sure that you freeze any overlapping data, and yeah, just get one view of the legal holds. And basically, I always start with retention schedules. I always start the conversation about legal holds first before I talk about anything else, because I just want to make sure that we are all compliant. Um, Data minimization, privacy. Please avoid merging everything. You don't need to merge everything. The moment you're non-compliant. I'm gonna give it to you straight. Yeah. So this is the moment to clean up. Um, you do have ROT. I don't believe that there's any organization without ROT and without non-compliant data. So please go for compliance and use your cybersecurity and privacy buddies as your wingman to make this point come across. Um, yeah, so I think then this is to do with system integration. Yeah, you need to validate, of course, all the data and timestamps and everything, but I'll leave that. So that's what I wanted to say about mergers. And now comes the thing that I just love, the divestments and also and after that the dissolution. Let's see if we can get there. Yeah, with the divestment, you're actually saying goodbye to part of your business. So you have to say goodbye to some of your data. And that is just super hard, because where does everything belong? You have to go through the boxes, you have to go through the data, and you have to do that at a level. You want to do it well, you have to do it at a level that nobody is equipped to do. Yeah. So ideally, you want to cleanly separate records between whatever the parent needs, the divested entity needs, and whatever it needs and whatever is shared between the two under a TSA, temporary service agreement. And you need to make sure that the buyer or the divested entity has everything they need to operate their business in a compliant manner. But you also need to kind of protect your own obligations and sensitive data. So, you know, what we saw once was that, manufacturing sold division and HR data was shared, and you just gave a copy of all the HR data to the divested. And here you go, copy of all the data. I actually have situations where the business was data, and it's not the HR situation. HR, is regulated in Europe, right? So it's a privacy breach basically if you do this there. Um, but also the business is data. We've seen some huge multinationals basically unable to part with their data and just said, here's a copy, a divested entity, and we keep the original copy too. And even though you are the formal owner of the data, we kind of regret spinning you off, divesting you. We just want to hold on to the data, which I mean is non-compliant. You're selling off that business, and you're also selling off the part where the database is. Yeah. Then there was a regulator investigation and we're like, yeah, unlawful data disclosure. And so many other things that are wrong at that moment, right? The retention is wrong, the data minimization principles is wrong. People were, of course, not informed. You're not informing employees of, by the way, that divested entity, we have given your employee personnel file to them, even though you don't work for them. No, that's not what you're in. So you're also not informing people properly. Um, and yeah, Donda, my dear friend Donda is making a wonderful point here on that the contracts and the appendices in any merger, acquisition, divestiture, dissolution agreement should properly mention the rules around data and records. And the good news is we do see that more often, but the thinking is still very limited. And I believe it should be in the M&A deal itself, but it should definitely also be in the TSA more. And it shouldn't be the vague language you see, oh, privacy, data processorship, whatever. No, it should also be about ownership and at a more practical operational level. Yeah. So thanks, Donda. Then, um, yeah, the risks, of course, data breaches, handing over your trade secrets, your anything confidential, your IP, or to give too little, and the buyer cannot run their operation. So, it's just very difficult to get this right. And unfortunately, we still just see copy paste. Here's everything, a lot in real life. Um, for the HR situation, though that experience stems from a bit of time ago and during my privacy practice. And at the time, they weren't really talking about fines. They were giving out orders on pain of penalty. So there was a threat of a fine. Yeah. So they had to remove the data, which they did. And then suddenly they did have the budget to do proper data discovery and all of that. So they avoided the fine, but all in all, they spent a couple of million on just the litigations and all the lawyers and the tools and everything to get it right. So that was definitely a waste. And then you had the follow-up litigation under the divestiture agreement. Um, so then, yeah, how do you do that? Well, this is way too simplistic, but as a parent, you need governance, tax records, employee files, and as a divested entity, you need operational customer files, transferred employees. But there's also a lot of shared documentation, especially on tax and governance, right? Where you need to be able to explain where you're at now with your bookkeeping, given the whole situation. So there's definitely a bit of overlap. Oh, I'm again going to say the same thing. We need an inventory in order to split. I'm gonna be too detailed there, and we need, you know, TSA, a divorce agreement for it's maybe more of a custody agreement or something, but data and systems and service levels and all of that. So that's important. Um, and for, yeah, it's not just boxes, it's digital is super important here, and you need to do a digital carve out, so to say. So you need to hand over the systems and the data and everything. And do you need data discovery tools for that? Yes, you should. But not just any. It should not be a cybersecurity focused this data discovery tool or something. I'm not really impressed by. Sorry for those of you in data discovery. I think we can still do better. I think there are a few vendors that really have a compliance perspective and understand the context of data. So we're not just looking for a social security number, but we understand this is a social security number in a text document that tries to achieve A. Yeah. So we need the data discovery tools to be contextual. If the data is dealt with in a contextual manner, we can do better splits. We can better attach retention periods to it and everything. So that's and we'll get there. I know a few wonderful tools that are really good at that. Not gonna name names today because I'll get some people offended probably. So yeah, minimization, of course. Don't just dump everything. You will be in violation of minimization and probably also likely transparency rules. Let's talk about dissolution, which I think is rather interesting. Um, I had a whole discussion yesterday with AI about dissolution, and it kind of thinks that after dissolution there's still a lot happening, but dissolution is literally where you dissolve the legal entity, and nothing remains. Now, um, that's not usually what dissolution means in the kind of like business worlds. I get a lot of people that say, yeah, we work for a multinational, and ever since the war in Ukraine, we have dissolved our operations in Russia. And I go, okay, so what does that mean? Well, we stopped our operations. Okay, but did you dissolve the legal entity? Yes, no. Or did you just stop your operations? It's a big difference. Because if there still is a surviving legal entity, then all the obligations, yeah, are still there. On the bookkeeping, the legal entity probably was the employer, so then you still need to keep all the personnel files. So there's still a shell, and that shell has obligations. Now, if you completely dissolve the legal entity, there is nothing there. And then you can argue because a lot the AI really told me like, no, you need to keep the personnel file and for regulatory obligations. But I'm like, of of whom? Because the legal entity doesn't exist. So how are you going to enforce against a non-existing legal entity? Now, I do believe that there are a few um, issues, of course, because especially in the employment context, right? You dissolve your consultancy, but then the ex-employees are asking for the personnel file, and rightfully so, later on. Do you have a legal or moral obligation, right? Well, maybe the legal entity itself not, but maybe the former parent company does have some legal or maybe moral obligation to hold on to those records. One thing that I believe is very important is that as a parent company or as a group, you need to be able to prove to any tax authority what the structure of your group was at a given moment of time. Yeah? So you probably need to keep any corporate governance records. Maybe you also need to keep the tax and bookkeeping records because you consolidated the books. Maybe you need to then, by analogy, also start to, or by extension, sorry, also need to look at all the personnel files and the payrolling and all of that. So it's a gliding scale, yeah? But the former employer, the legal entity, doesn't exist anymore. So effectively, it's very hard for employees to sue a non-existing entity. Um, but of course, the risks are loss of records, and especially for tax audits and pensions and everything. So, I do believe it would be nice if you keep some things, but think also of privacy concerns. As a parent company, you cannot just keep everything of that legal entity. There is no business case anymore, in a way. Um, so then again, you need to have the inventory and you need to know what's out there before you can make a decision. You need to appoint a custodian. And that's usually the legal entity itself or the parent company. So that's that. I was already afraid I was not gonna make time today. Let's just skip for bankruptcy. I'm gonna maybe just very briefly talk about you need to preserve records for the courts, but it's you need to hand it over basically to the bankruptcy trustee. Yeah, they are in charge now. They need to keep everything. So as long as you're still employed and paid, it could very well be that the records manager is the one that survives the longest during bankruptcy because the bankruptcy trustee needs you to find everything that they need. Yeah. So love this page. I think that's basically what's happening usually. Or this one. I just can imagine that the bankruptcy trustee is just looking in the cupboards and everything, trying to find out. So. Um, I am going to um, um, finish with this. And they lived happily ever after, of course, as with any fairy tale. I believe that records management is the foundation of everything, and you guys are in play at the moment of an important transition. There are many more important litigations and some other restructurings, and I could have spoken about other important transitions. I did not. But I think the lesson learned is prepare now, be ready later. Yeah, I think that's the most important part. With 2 minutes to spare, I want to see if anyone has a very urgent question for me. And otherwise, if not, did anyone raise their hand,
I
Jennifer?
am taking a look here.
Um,
These we don't have anyone with their hand raised yet. If anyone wants to raise their hand, we can allow you to come on live and ask your question. There was a question from early on. It's a point of view, legal versus privacy. From your experience, which party tends to be the dominating factor for consideration in records management, whether it be from retaining or destruction decision?
this is where I believe that there are two kind of like major streams within any organization. It's either you look at data records from a legal perspective and everything is owned by legal because there can be litigations. Yeah, so that's one part. Or you can look at no, for us, the value of data drives the whole discussion, and then usually privacy comes into play. Yeah. So it is, and then very often privacy is legal, so it doesn't really matter what we're doing. So for me, the driving, no, that's the funny part. There is no final say in this. I think there are just these two kind of perspectives. So whichever is the dominant perspective within the company usually wins the conversation. Yeah.
That's what I typically hear. All right, well, we are at time. So I will, before we depart, I will just send or give everyone one last reminder that the current rates for InfoCon do go up on September 22nd. So you've got 3 weeks to get registered at our current rates. We've got all kinds of really good stuff planned, and Vaughn and his team will be there in person to answer questions. So if you would like to go and have a great discussion, I know that Vana and his team always brings a really great energy. His section of the expo floor is always a good time. So if you are going to be joining us for InfoCon, definitely go and find the Filers Keepers booth on the expo floor. It's definitely a good time to be had. But also, Vana always has great insights. You'll have a session at InfoCon. So definitely look that up and plan to attend to get some really good insights and new information, on global retention and all the things that are happening in the world. So take a chance to go. Come to InfoCon, see us, have a good time. Rates go up on September 22nd, so make your plans now and get registered while you can at the current rates. And with that, we will see everyone on the next webinar.
All right. Thank you, everyone.